Hey everybody, welcome back to the Vibe Guide yet again. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. Um, this week's episode, I wanted to talk about Dark Night of the Soul, getting back into like some spiritual topics because I feel like I've kind of shied away from them in the past few weeks. Like it's always kind of interwoven, but doing a topic that is specifically related to spirituality and things that have happened along my journey that have led me to be a spiritual person. I haven't really talked about that much in recent weeks. So I was actually listening to another podcast. I have no idea who or what the podcast is. It just came up on my YouTube. And I probably should have looked that up to share with you guys because it was an actual, he has a lot of like spiritual people on, a lot of psychics, a lot of mediums, a lot of astrologers, people that are kind of in this spiritual world. So that's kind of the basis of his podcast. And he interviews a lot of people and has millions of listeners and things like that. So I forget who it is, like a white dude. Honestly, you guys, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at my YouTube because a lot of this stuff just comes like organically into me. Like it just was on my YouTube. And I was like, oh, and the astrologer that he had on, Deborah Silverman, I really, really, really like her. And I like the way that she does astrology and how she breaks it down. And it's really easy to understand. And she uses the four elements, which is kind of unique to how she studies astrology and how she teaches it. So I really liked her. So I saw that she had done an interview with him. And it was all about like, after the election and things like what to look forward to with this Pluto and Aquarius energy in 2025. And so, anyways, that was one of the episodes. And this particular episode that I had listened to, they had really gone into depth about the dark night of the soul and that whole experience. And yeah, it just really resonated with me. And I don't know that I've shared that story like in full on here on the podcast. And so them having that conversation and they had both experienced their own, unique versions of their own dark night of the soul. It's very individual to everyone and it comes in different shapes and sizes and experiences and lengths of time. And some people never experience one, some people experience multiple throughout their life. And so um, the woman who shared her experience, I really, really, really resonated with what she was saying. Hers was very quick. So she said she had hers just for a day. And mine tended, I think it lasted like a few months. Like I don't have like a linear, like exact start and stop date, but they're like reading back in my journals and things like that from the time period that I had it. It's very clear that like I was like in a really dark like depressive state. And then, 3 months later, that whole energy shifted for me. And like what I was writing in my journals was much more positive and had just like a very different outlook. And so I can't like pinpoint one specific thing. And I didn't have like this woman, I didn't, she had one day of it. And she explained that she was just kind of like, had a complete breakdown, was like in her closet crying all day. And like she has kids and a husband and it just was like a really um, explosive experience that she had. And then on the other side of it, she, had kind of elevated to another level of like her spirituality and she's psychic and, she's also a nurse. And so I resonated with her on that. And so her gifts were kind of magnified after that experience. So very similar for me, just not the same kind of situation. And I didn't even know I wanted to talk about it because we are into Pluto and Aquarius now. And Pluto is that planet of basically like death and rebirth. And it kind of forces us to get into like the deepest, darkest bits of ourselves. And so moving into Aquarius, like it's all about that individual journey, but then also bringing it into the collective. So I just thought that this was like a really helpful topic because if you guys listen to this and you've had something similar, like you're going to resonate. And if you haven't, like you're probably going to think I'm cuckoo cuckoo, which we all know at this point, like I could care less. This stuff is woo woo and it's stuff that's changed my life, and it's stuff that's changed me to be a better human being. So like I'll never stop talking about it and sharing about it because um I believe that everything gets put into our path for a reason, and there's a reason why that happened to me and a reason why I have a podcast. I'm talking about it and sharing about it, and somebody out there is going to resonate with it and it's going to help them in their own journey, and like that's the point. So, I guess I'll go back to like for those that don't know and don't know me personally, I lived in France. I moved over for a relationship. It's probably about 2 years now. I don't even know. Time is like weird. You guys know, like, I'm not big on dates and like things like that. And I just go back in my journal, and that's the only reason I know anything about time or dates or like, because it just all, it seems to like mold into one when you think back on it. But there's like these like really specific things that I remember how I felt on a certain day, or like going back and reading my journal, like the dates and stuff like that don't really mean a whole lot to me, but I can immediately like put myself back in like how I was feeling and things like that. So I'm not a huge date person, but I know it was at least 2 years ago. August 1st, actually, because I kept the plane ticket. I flew into Paris, and I think it was 2020. See, this is what I'm saying. 2022, maybe? I have no idea. Yeah, it had to be 2022 because it's 2023. No, it's 2024. Oh my gosh, you guys see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. So it was 2023, maybe? We don't know. Anyways, I moved to France, and um up until that point, like I was working full time as a nurse. I really wasn't that happy. I was like really ready to um shed that part of myself, like nursing. I'd like moved over there and I'd left it behind, and I was like super excited to have time to just breathe and like to really dive into myself, which I had no idea that this journey would like be a complete and utter like dive into my entire life on the deepest level. I had no idea what was waiting for me in France. But I did. I had that intention of just like wanting to like restart, renew, refresh. Like I'm moving to a different country. Like there's going to be opportunities that are going to come in, like maybe for career. And so I just wanted to be open to anything, and I wanted to leave nursing behind. And that's really like I went into France with like super excited, fresh energy, and like just excited. You know what I mean? Like I was in love. I was moving over there. We just, had an apartment and like furnishing it, and just I don't know, like you get into a new country and everything's new and exciting, and overwhelming and intimidating at the same time, but like, way more positive than negative. And I had a lot of hope for, you know, living in France and that becoming my home for forever and things like that. So very quickly, things changed. And I moved over in August, and I think I think I looked back at my journals. I think by October, early November, like our relationship had ended. And things changed very drastically. I ended up staying in France until like that next year, until March, I think is when I moved, and I left and I went to Greece. So yeah, kind of like a massive whirlwind of energy. Like when I really think back to it, it seemed so long. It seemed like I was in France for like forever. But when I look back on it, I mean, I really only lived there full time for like 6 months, maybe a little bit longer. But yeah, it feels like that energy of that time. There was just like so much going on and like internally within me. And so throughout those days, I put a lot of pressure on myself, first of all, for to learn the language. And I think I put way too much pressure on myself. Because every journal entry that I read, it was like, I was just like so focused on that because I really wanted to. I know how important it is to the French to learn their language. And so, like, I really wanted to. And I'd already taken French in high school. And so, like, I had a foundational level of it. And so, like, I really just wanted to pick it up and pick it up quickly. And so, like, I put all my energy and time into that. And then, within a few weeks of doing that, I felt really drained. I felt really like just not myself. I felt, oh, I don't know. I just really felt like I don't want to be doing this. Like I don't want to be learning French. I I'm not enjoying this, and we even thought about like me taking a class like in the college and like getting to know people and but like for whatever reason like those things like just didn't work out. They didn't come to fruition. It wasn't for like lack of trying. Like he looked, I looked, I had the money to do it. It just I don't know, like for whatever reason it just never came to be, and I'm sure that's probably a sign of like what happened, like the relationship ended and I ended up going elsewhere. So that's probably the reason why those things didn't happen for me. But it wasn't for like lack of trying. And I just found it really frustrating. And um our relationship started to show a lot of cracks to me personally. I just felt like um it got to a point where I didn't really want to make it work. I didn't think that it just started to all feel wrong. It started to not feel right to me, but at the same time, I don't know how to explain, like, I wasn't, like, a very spiritual person at this time. Um, so I was putting it on logical things. Like, I was like, "Okay, I have PCOS." Like, I even wrote this stuff in my journal. That's the only reason why I know because I read my journal before I did this episode. Um, I thought maybe because I hadn't had a menstrual cycle in a few months because of my PCOS and like all the stress of moving. And then I was having a lot of like GI issues with the food. And then I had had GI issues prior to leaving, like really severe heartburn and stuff like that. And I worked nights as a nurse. And so I think it was just like really taking a toll on my body and the stress. And I was having a really hard time, which I've never had stomach issues before in my life. So it just was like a lot of things that were happening, and I was trying to put, like, logical explanations behind it, so and I can look back now and realize, like, I think I was just unhappy because the relationship was over, and I was, like, really trying to make it work, and so was he, and, I even wrote, like, in my journal, like, we had dinner one night, and, like, we both we it was just, like, very abrupt, and I was like, "I don't know how this is gonna work, like, I don't know if I can continue to do this," and his energy was like, I agree. Like, I don't know. It's hard to see. Like, it's hard to see the future of, like, how this is gonna work out, and, he was giving so much and I was giving so much, but it wasn't enough. Like, it just wasn't enough for the relationship. So, neither one of us really wanted to go the therapy route. We didn't even, like, discuss that. It was just a deeper sense of, like, it's not gonna work. Like, you could drag this out, like, you could go to therapy, you could do all the things, like but there was just, like, an innate knowing, I think, between him and me that it just I wasn't there. And it made us both, like, incredibly sad. Like, I mean, it was a really emotional time, but the actual conversation that we had about the relationship and ending it was just, like, very to the point, like, did not mince words, like, you know we just kinda looked at each other and we're like, what are we gonna do? Like, I don't think this is gonna work, you know? And, after a conversation like that, of course, weeks, and months of emotion and things like that, like, arguments happen and you're uncomfortable and we're living in the same apartment. And I had just refused to come back to the United States. And like, he was so kind in giving me a place to live and, time for me to sort out if I was going to stay in Europe or not because he was also super kind in the fact that, like, obviously I came over there and I gave up everything to move over there. And, he wasn't about to just like throw me out on my ass. And like he was just like respectful of like I have dreams in life and like at that point I really didn't want to come back to the US. So he was just like still super supportive. And so I ended up living there until March. And in between all this, I had because I was so confused about the relationship and I was so confused about like on paper, this man is everything that I've asked for. He's the most kind, caring, loyal, loving, add in French, which is amazing. And like I get to like experience this like romance, whirlwind romance that people read about in novels and things like that. And like, but there was something that wasn't working. And a lot of things that weren't working. And so I was like really, really, really struggling with that. And so in between all this, you know, I had started to seek out help about it because I think rationally, logically, like me putting excuses on it and like trying to rationalize it of like, oh, maybe I just feel off in the relationship because of my PCOS and like it's hormones or I just moved over here. There's so much going on. Like, of course, the relationship's going to take a hit. Like, you start to like give all these rational reasons, which I said before, but I just knew that there was just something not right. And so I ended up, and you guys know I told this story about meeting Kim Salter, my intuitive guide, and that just happened so strangely. And it was in a time where I really, really, really needed some help. Like I really was so confused mentally. And like you guys know, like this is before I became a spiritual person and like before I would have gone into like how I was actually feeling. Like I don't know how to explain that now because it's just so foreign to me. I don't live my life that way. But like at that point in my life, I wasn't understanding like feeling. I wasn't understanding logically like the relationship was over in my heart. Like I just didn't know. I wanted to put rational reasons behind it. And sometimes you don't need all that. Like sometimes it's just over. And the feeling is it's over, you know? And I don't know, this probably sounds crazy, but like it just wasn't clicking with me and it was making me really miserable. And like I wanted to like analyze it and like make it make sense and like put it in my brain in a way that there's like excuse for, it not working and like I needed a reason and all this stuff. And like that wasn't happening. So it was making me really miserable. And that's when Kim came in and she really reminded me of my intuition and like of my heart space and like gave me all these tools and exercises to get back into my body, and to like really pay attention and to really start journaling and using like even it's like a feeling board. It's like a words that can depict like your feeling, right? And so I'd never done this before and like I just kind of dove in because it felt really right and it felt like so helpful to start to like sort through what I was feeling because I'd never done that before. Like even in therapy, you don't really, I mean, you do on a certain level, but like not like this. And so I had started to like do that kind of work. And then all of a sudden I was like pulled towards meditation. I have never meditated before, like not seriously. Like I had tried it probably like years before. I remember I was like sitting on my bed and I remember I was like trying to meditate and my mom was like walking by and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Bitch, I'm meditating. Like, what do you think? Like, leave me alone." And she just kind of laughed at me. And then I'm like, I remember sitting there being like, "Is this what meditation is?" Like, I don't know. I remember like sitting there for like 30 minutes and being like, "I don't know if I'm doing it. Like, is this, I don't know." I had no idea. So this time I was like pulled towards meditation. Like, it was like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, there was and I didn't really have the tools. Like when I first meditated, I just like did it on my own and I just like went quiet in the house and like this time I had the knowledge to like look it up on YouTube and find like guided meditations. And like no one had put this on me. Like Kim didn't mention meditation, like nothing. She was more focused on like me actually really paying attention to how things make me feel. And so at the same time, I'm like diving into meditation. And I mean, it was like this urge, like this physical urge to meditate. If I didn't meditate, I felt off. I felt weird. I felt not like something was not right. And this was like in the span of like 3 months. Like I would meditate for hours, you guys, hours and go into such deep spaces. Like I would forget that my body was even like physical. Like I wouldn't even feel my body anymore. Like that's how deep I got into meditation. And it was so fucking helpful to me, you guys. Like it changed everything for me. Everything. And I slowly felt like such a different person. And these things that were starting to bother me made sense. And then I was like, within my relationship and living in France and all of these things started to click. They started to make sense. And it wasn't like, it was deeper than just like logically making it make sense, like what I was explaining before, like trying to put reasons why the relationship wasn't working. It was like a deep soul level. And then all of a sudden, all these physical things, like him going out and drinking and like wanting me to come, I was like, I don't want to go. Like I don't want to. Like I feel good like just being at home, like in my sweatpants and just like reading my book or like doing what, like I don't want to do that anymore. And it was the first time that I'd really started to, like, not do things because other people wanted me to. And I remember we got in a big fight because one of his family friends was, like, having people over, and obviously it invited me and Sebastian, and, like, I was about to do that people pleasing thing where I was just gonna go to, like, please them and please his family friend and his family and him, and I got so anxious, you guys, like, I almost had a panic attack, and I was like, "I can't go." I cannot go. And he got so mad at me and he left without speaking to me. And I felt so relieved, to be honest with you. I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't feel bad. I felt so relieved that he had left and gone by himself and I didn't have to go because I didn't want to. And I had felt so relieved and I just felt like, and then, we worked it out later and like I apologized because that's not, you know what I mean? Like I was invited, they had planned on me coming and like that's not okay just to like leave people hanging and like in the French culture, it's like extremely rude. And like I totally, was like apologetic for that, but I wasn't apologetic for like me not wanting to go. Like I just didn't want to and I didn't want to socialize. I just didn't want to do it. And so I didn't apologize for that, but like the way it all went down, like I totally, was like wrong in that. And I wish I could have known myself a little bit better to be more mature about it instead of just like not saying anything. And then in the last minute, when we're like grabbing the keys to leave, I'm like, I can't go. Like, I don't want to go. I just don't want to go. I don't know. Like, I'm going to throw up. I don't want to go. Very strong feeling. And, so anyways, those little bits and like those little examples are like things that I'm talking about. Like I was just starting to like really learn myself. And so it was messy and ugly and it wasn't, some of the best situations are like handled the best way. And so right around all this, I'd really started to feel too. And like the woman in the podcast, she described this too of like feeling depressed but also feeling hopeful at the same time. Because I've dealt with like clinical depression for like a lot of my life and like not understanding what it was and blaming like PCOS and blaming all these like external things and why I had depression. I never took it. I never took medication. I just like managed it. I like kind of grinned and bared it. And like some moments in my life were way worse and I had suicidal ideations. And other days it was just like getting by. You know what I mean? And then other days I was okay. So it wasn't like I could have gone on medication probably and it probably would have been helpful throughout my life, but there was something in me that, like, I just didn't feel that that was necessary. And so I never did, and I always felt like it wasn't, like, the brain chemistry, 'cause there is something to be said for people's brain chemistry being off, and, like, sometimes you do need an SSRI to, like, whoop, like, refix the chemicals in your brain, and, like, I'm not doubting science at all. But for me, I always had this inclination that it was um, like from life and like from choices and from like the life that I'm living because it just never felt right to me. But that's a whole nother thing. Like I just had no idea how to get out of it or like what to do. Or like they say this is how you should live your life, but like I'm miserable and like I got a college education. I did all the things. I'm doing this. But I'm miserable. I'm miserable. Like I'm finding no happiness in anything. Misery. Every single day. Like, I'm, like, waking up feeling like, I don't wanna do this. This is miserable. Like, another day of, like, no joy, no spark, no light, no nothing. Like, that's how I felt for a lot of years. And this time, it felt different. It felt really dark and deep and, like, this urge to just be by myself all the time, to just be very insular, to be by myself. Anyone's energy around me really bothered me. it really I started to realize that, like, certain people's energy really drained me. I started to realize that certain conversations I didn't wanna have anymore. Like, all of these little bits were, like, bubbling at the surface, and I was just feeling so emotional and down. But through it all, there was, like, this little thread of, like, hope that I continually had, and I if you've ever dealt with depression, hope is not a word that is in your vocabulary. Hope is, like, the furthest thing. And when someone tells you, like, "This too shall pass," or whatever, when you're, like, in the depths of depression, you really wanna, like, strangle them and be like, "You do not understand how I feel, like, that's not gonna help me, because I wake up in the morning and I feel like this again, so it's not like this too shall pass, babe, because like, I'm feeling like this over and over and over and over and over and over, and I'm ready to, like, end it." You know what I mean? Like, that's what I had felt. But this time, I really believed that. Like, this too shall pass. I felt it in my soul. I was like, this is something's happening. Like, something's changing within me. Something's happening. I trust and believe that I'll get through this. And like, I had just never felt that way before. Never. And so every day when I woke up and I still kind of felt like shitty and like depressive, and I just felt like really in this like deep dark hole, there was some sort of energy. There was some sort of like the light at the end of the tunnel, which I had never experienced before. And I was just like letting things come into my life. So like shadow work became really apparent to me. I started to dive into that. I started to do therapy. I found like a familial like based therapist, which I didn't even know that she was. She just ended up being that. And she really triggered me in certain ways and showed a lot of things to me, and I think I was a mirror for her, and I you guys know if you listen way back to, like, some of my first episodes, and that time with that therapist, like, we triggered each other so bad, but, like, in a growth kind of way, because I reminded her of someone in her family, and she reminded me of someone in my family, and we just, like, went at it. But at the end of it, like, I learned a lot, and I think she did too, so it was kind of funny to have that happen, but so a lot of these experiences and, like, working with Kim and my intuitive coach and then meditating and just understanding that things aren't they're not what they seem, and the whole point of, like, the dark night of the soul, because mine was just not it was like it happened over a length of time. And so it wasn't like this, like, bang, you have the dark night of the soul, and then, like, you wake up and you're like, "Whoa, holy shit." I'm like, I feel totally different. Like, this was, like, over a length of time for me. And so, like, little by little, I started to really, really, really feel like my world changing, and there was no going back. And I think as far as, like, my romantic relationship, that sealed the door for me, because I this is what they say about the dark night of the soul. It's like an energetic up level, right? So my frequency is no longer what it used to be. I can never go back. Like there's no way. There's no way I can go back to how I used to be. It's impossible. You just can't. So I energetically uplifted, and it's so funny because I've had psychics tell me this like recently that like a lot of the stuff like with my family and it's like a frequency. It's like some of the people like in my family are having a really hard time understanding me and like where I'm coming from and able to come to some sort of resolve, because I've just like, and I'm not saying this because oh I'm better than you and I'm on a higher frequency. I'm not. It's just like my life, and like this is what happened is like I up leveled, and so I see things very differently now, and I feel things very differently, and things that bothered me before, they don't bother me anymore, and, like, things that I used to stress about before wouldn't even cross my mind now, and, like, I just have a very different view of the world and my life and, like, what I will allow in and what I won't, and so many things elevated, and so it is like a cellular renewal. It's like an energetic upgrade, and I know that sounds like crazy and whatever, because when I used to hear people talk like this, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, whatever." But then I experienced it and I'm like, "Holy shit, it's real." Like, It really is, and so, over the course of, like, those 6 months or so, and then by the time I had gotten to Greece, it was like a practice of, like, putting it into play, and, like, in Greece is where I started this podcast, and so it was, like, really putting these things into, like, my physical, earthly, like, human being. All of these bits and pieces that I learned over the past, like, 6 months and, like, everything that was integrated into me, I was really starting to put it into form, and I was, expressing myself differently, and I was intuitive and connecting with, spirit guides on the other side and other people's spirit guides and, like, my family members that have passed over, and, like, all of these changes were happening, and I was like, "Oh my god," and I was never scared, I was never, like, freaked out, I was like, "This is really cool." Like, I tapped into a power that I had no idea, well, I shouldn't say I had no idea, because I've always kind of felt that, but I never knew how, or, I just never knew anything about it. And so, by the time I had gotten to Greece, I was a very different person. And when I look back on my relationship, I was like, "Yeah, it was never gonna work. Never gonna work," because I just turned into a different person altogether, and that's okay. And, like, some people can grow with you, and it's very true, like, some people stay very, and which is not, I'm not, like, I don't wanna say that, like, I'm better, and I don't want it to come off even sounding like that, because I don't believe that at all. I just, like I said, I moved into, like, I moved into a different frequency, a different vibration, and so along with that comes, like, I'm not going out and partying, I'm not going out and drinking, that's, like, the last thing I wanna do. I wanna have, like, deep conversations, I wanna, like, talk to people on a soul level, I want to, like, really feel life, I want to inspire other people, I want more meaning for my own life, I don't wanna just be, like, wandering around and, like, going to bars and, like, doing what people said I should do because you should be a nurse because you got a nursing degree, and, like, all of that kinda stuff was over for me, and I was really doing things that, like, I wanted to do for the first time in my life, and, like, reorganizing relationships in my life based on how they made me feel or how they made me feel, and I had a lot of things that fell away, and they say, like, that's the dark night of the soul. It's like, friendships ended, like, period, point blank. I closed doors so quickly. I became estranged from family later on, months later. Um that romantic relationship ended for me. The relationships that continued to stay in my life were the relationships that, like, accepted me at, like, the level that I was at. They weren't calling me weird or crazy or woo woo, or they were looking at me like, "Damn, you really have changed, but, like, huh, it's interesting." Like, they were, like, interested in my journey and, like, wondering, like, what was going on, and not, like, concerned for me, but, like, "What are you doing over there?" Like, "What's going on?" Because you seem more mature, you seem more grounded, you seem more level, you seem more like something had shifted, and I think people could see it and feel it and tell. So, and let me tell you guys right now, like, I had never heard of the Dark Night of the Soul. So all this is happening to me, and I've never heard of it. I think, like, it wasn't until, like, a year later, not a year later, actually, no. It would have been close to a year, actually, close to a year since when everything had started, and I had felt all this changing and shifting and things falling away from me and breaking down, and, like, don't get me wrong, like, it's some of the most painful stuff I've ever been through. Like, it wasn't like, "Oh, yeah," like, I went through the dark night of the soul and, like, came out it was, like, flowery and fucking rainbows and sunshine. No way. It is, like, some of your deepest, darkest, hardest moments in your life, and it's some of the deepest work that I've ever done, like, especially shadow work and, like, really learning to, like, accept the parts of me that I hate about myself, and that I really had to learn to, like, alchemize, and I had to learn how to, like, move through feeling instead of, like, pushing it away or just not talking about it or running away from it, because that's a classic thing that I do. Like, I had to really, like, sit there and take it and, like, cry and be really mad and be really upset, and, like, not at anyone in particular, but, like, I had to work through a lot of situations, like a lot of past trauma, a lot of things that I just wrote off for my life. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. I just was like, "Oh, well, everyone has these things happen to them." And, a therapist is looking at you like, "No, actually not that's not true." Like you're downplaying a lot of things that have happened in your life, and like it's time to kind of unearth it and heal it and like move through it because that's the whole point. Like that's the healthy way to deal with things. And so by the time I had been in Greece, I had felt much better. There is just something about when I think back on this like time in my life, like I really almost feel like it's like a book. And I'm like, I feel like I'm like that character. Almost like Julia Roberts. What's that Eat Pray Love or something like that? Because I got to Greece and it was like those waters healed me like nothing I had experienced. And I had been to Greece before, and the last time I was at Greece, it was like party central, and I was like in Mykonos, like skinny dipping and like wasted and didn't, very different experience. So this time it was like I wanted to be alone. I didn't want to be bothered. I wanted to be a little hermit. I wanted to get up and go to the beach, swim in the Aegean, mind my own business. And it was just so incredibly healing, and I met some of the sweetest, kindest people that I've ever met, you know, throughout that whole entire, like what I was there almost 4 months. Just some of the nicest people, like, went on dates with people, which was, like, so random, it's not my thing to, like, jump into something right after I've ended a relationship, I've never been that kind of person, but it just felt different, and, like, I felt like I don't know, I felt just, like, such a lightness about myself. So just a really magical, like, yummy time, to be honest with you, like, being in Greece. Like, it just was I was still working through a lot of stuff, and I like I said, it was hard to really put it into, like, who I was now and, like, trying to make it make sense on, like, this, like, physical plane of, like, career and, like, dating people and, like, who am I? Like, it was kinda messy and ugly too then, like, you know what I mean? And, like, people were having issues with me for, like, being intuitive and sharing messages and having to have really hard conversations about, like, you can be Christian and I can be spiritual and we can both coexist and it's fine, like, I'm not possessed by the devil, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of those conversations, like, believe it or not, were happening, and so, like, it was still a, like, really like, a heavy time for me and, like, a lot of growth and, like, it brought a lot of change, but, like, good change and, like, good conversations and, like, the people who were willing to have those conversations with me and willing to be open-minded, like, we move forward and, like, our relationships are better for it and they're stronger. But, like I said, like, on the flip side of that, other relationships fell to pieces because I had just start I it was like I had taken the blindfold off, and it was like I was not living in an illusion anymore of, like, how I wanted people to be in my life and what I had thought they were. It was like it was taken completely off, and it was like, "Boom. These people that you have around you, this is exactly who they are, and take them for face value, and call whatever problem, conflict, or whatever is happening between these relationships, like, state it for exactly what it is. You know what I mean? Like, don't sit there and make excuses for them. Like, oh, I don't think that they would ever do that to me. Like, they are doing it to you, period. Like, it's happening. This is real. Like that kind of energy was happening. And that I had always kind of given people the benefit of the doubt, or like, I don't like, why would that person do that to me? I don't think that they would do that to me. Or why would they speak to me like that? Like, I don't know. Like, I'd always so this energy was like very different. And so a lot of those relationships were just like cut off at the knees. And, so that was just, like, real that was a lot of, like, grease, but it was, like, I never felt bad about it, I never, like I just was, like, enjoying my life, and I was like, "You know what? I see you now for exactly what it is, like, what this relationship is, like, I'm not happy about it, it's brought me a lot of, like, feelings that I don't wanna have, like, what should be in a relationship and, like, what should be in a friendship, like, I don't wanna feel like this in this relationship anymore, and so, like, I'm good, like, now I'm moving on, and I'm gonna go swim in the Aegean and talk to the fishies and like you're gonna be fine and I'm gonna be fine. We're just not gonna be friends anymore. Like whatever. Like it was just a lot of that energy, you guys. And so Yeah, coming out of the other end of, like, the dark night of the soul is, like, very interesting, and having to, like, integrate it into real life is, like, it's still very difficult. So, after that, I you guys know Greece got, like, way too hot for me, like, for real, like, temperature, like, way too hot. And so, like, the wildfires and, like, all that was going on, and so I wanted to get out, and so I left and I went to Copenhagen, and in Copenhagen was so man, like, really do feel like it's like a book or something, because I was staying in this hostel, and this man comes up to me, and he goes I'm, like, writing in my journal, I'm, like, sitting in the common room, and, like, if you stay in a hostel, like, there's a common area, they had, like, beer and wine, and, like, you could make your food out there, just, like, hang out, you could play pool, you could watch the World Cup was on, so a lot of people were out watching the World Cup, and, like, um so it was kinda, like, late in the afternoon, and I was just, like, journaling about, like, the day that I'd had and whatever, I don't even remember what I did that day. Um, but this man comes up to me, he's, like, probably maybe early 40s, maybe? I don't know, like, late 30s, early 40s, and he was like, "Are you a writer?" And I was like I, like, kinda started laughing, and I was like, "Oh my god, I wish." Like, how fun of a life would that be to just, like, write novels or whatever, like, that would be so cool, like, I'm like, "No, I can barely spell." Like, I'm literally sometimes I think I'm dyslexic, like, "No, I'm not a writer, I'm just journaling," and he started laughing, and he sat down, it was like a little sofa thing, and he sat down on the other side, and, we just, like, started chatting, and, why we were in Copenhagen and things like that, and I don't know, like, immediately, we started talking about some of the deepest things, you guys. I have no idea. Like, I didn't get, like, a weird, creepy vibe, like, he was, like, hitting on me or, like, whatever. We were just, like, having a really, really, really good conversation. So the next day we were there, I had no, like, end date. So, like, I was in Copenhagen, I'd really, really loved it, and I'd actually you guys know I tried to get my nursing license approved to go back to Denmark, but that did not work out. So, anyways, I loved Copenhagen, and so, like, I was just gonna be there for as long as I wanted to. And, he was only there for, like, a week or something like that, or 5 days. So we decided, like, the next day to, like I had not really done too much touristy stuff. I think I'd gotten in the night before, and he had gotten in around the same time. So we just, like, ended up doing, like, all this touristy stuff together and, like, going to museums and doing all this stuff. And you guys, like, some of the most enlightening conversation I've ever had in my entire life. I mean, one day we sat in the park, we had gone to a museum, it was, like, raining, and then the raining let up, and, like, we had just, like, walked all around the city and, like, gone and gotten lunch and stuff, and then we sat in the park. We talked for hours, didn't even realize, and the park attendant came by, and he was like, "Hey, like, you guys gotta go, like, we're closing the park," and we were like, "Oh my god." Like, and in that moment, and in that park, in the conversation, he had brought up The Dark Night of the Soul, and this man, I don't even think I told you guys, he's a physicist. So he is like Mr. Science. He's half Indian, half American. His dad or mom was Indian, and I don't know. It's like very intelligent, like you guys, very intelligent man. And I'm like keeping up with this guy because at this point, you guys, like this is like so weird of my life. But I was reading all about quantum physics, all about quantum physics. So like we were having all these conversations about quantum physics and all these like famous people and all these theories, and, like, I'm, like, keeping up with this guy, and I'm like, "This is crazy, like, I'm smart? What?" Like, this like, on this level smart, like, I'm smart, like, don't get me wrong, I'm smart. But, like, to, like, have a conversation with a physicist about physics, and I'm like, it was so funny because I was like, "I can't even." I was like, "Am I actually making sense? Like, am I right?" He's like, "No, like, yeah, you're totally right." And I'm like, Should do I need to go get a master's in physics? Like, what's happening?" Like, like, am I actually pretty decent at math? Like, what's happening? Like, I don't know. So that was just so funny. And then in that conversation, we were talking about something I had no idea. And he mentioned the Dark Night of the Soul. I think I had started talking about like my experience in France, and like I was like sharing with him like all these things that were happening to me. And he was like, "Oh yeah, like the Dark Night of the Soul, I've had one." And I was like, "What is that?" He was like, "The Dark Night of the Soul, like, you don't know what that is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about." He's like, "Exactly what you experienced, and, like, you become, like, a very spiritual person on the other side, and, like, you see things very differently, and, like, you had, like, a frequency change. That's what they call, like, the Dark Night of the Soul." And I was like, "Bro." So I remember I went home, like, or we obviously at this point, I was in an Airbnb, he was in a hotel. We had changed hostels. And so, like, I went back to my Airbnb and I just, like, spent all night reading about it, and, like, everything that when you Google it described exactly what I went through, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." Like, you wouldn't think a physicist. He was very spiritual, and I think maybe that was, like, his Indian side of his upbringing, so he was, like, this, like, mesh of, like, science and, like, super cool, analytical, logical, reason, scientific thinking, and then also had this, like, really amazing spiritual side to him, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, at that time, it just brought me so much joy, like, meeting him and having these conversations day in and day out. I mean, hours we spent together, and it was just like we were just, like, buddies, you know what I mean? Like, it was just so weird, you guys, but it helped me understand and, like, putting the Dark Night of the Soul to my experience and then being able to Google it and understand it all. It just, like, it clicked. It all just was like, "Bing," and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm not alone." And, like, the fact that, like, a physicist also had this experience, I just felt, like, way less alone. I felt, like, way less crazy. I felt like because at this point, you guys, like, I had really just started to integrate this stuff into, like, my experience, and, like, I was life coaching and I was being an intuitive life coach, and, like, I was getting a lot of, like, negativity. Like, like, people were, like, looking at me like I was crazy and like I was cuckoo and like, "You're a witch and, like, you worship the devil and, like, you're talking to, like, spirits. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?" You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of that energy swirling around me at that time. So then to meet a physicist, of all people, and we are talking about energy, vibration, frequency, like, all of these things, and we're, like, on the same page, like, it was so oh my gosh, you guys, it just makes my heart so happy. You probably tell it in my voice right now. Like, it just made my heart so happy to meet him. And I hope he listens to this. Like, hi, Vivek. And I think he had like mentioned he had been on a podcast because at this point I was like so new in podcasting and I was like so embarrassed to like even say I had one. And he was like, "No, that's so cool. Like, I was just on a podcast talking about physics and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, so yeah, just like a wonderful time in Copenhagen and really just like really helped me solidify like who I was becoming. And it was like okay to become this person and to like shed these old layers and to arise like a new person that's not the same, that I'm not into the same thing. So like, yeah, I am weird. Yeah, I am the spiritual stuff. Like, yeah, I do talk to spirits. Like, yeah, 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 yeah. Like, why don't you? What the fuck? Like, you're missing out. You're missing out. Like, you live in this like ugly ass 3D world. I don't. I'm way happier now than I've ever been in my entire life. And does my life look like how I want to? Fuck no. I'm sitting in my childhood bedroom right now. Like 33, about to turn 34, and I'm chilling with my mom at our house and like in Tappahannock and like, you guys think I wanted this for my life? No, but like I've never been more content and like more happy. And I know it's because I had this energetic uplift or, up level, and I see things very differently and I approach life very differently. And all the things that happen to me are meant to happen and they're meant to show me something and guide me somewhere. And like, it's not poor, pitiful me anymore. And I'm not like self loathing and all these awful things that I did for years and years and years. So I'm like, I'm sharing all of this, you guys, because I know that there's somewhere out there listening that's probably had similar experiences, or they're going to go, the dark night of the soul is going to hit you in your soul, and you're going to be like, oh, wait, let me Google it. Let me see. What is this about? And it's for a reason. Things don't come along your path, I promise you guys, for no reason. Things get brought into your life for a particular reason. There's a reason why someone will never hear Dark Night of the Soul. They might never hear those words put together. They might never know anything about it. And there's a reason. And there's a reason why it was put in my life. and why I experienced it. And so I just wanted to share it too because it felt so appropriate, like with what's happening in like the stars and kind of I've gotten to such a good place in my life. Like now I'm like 2 years out from that and going into my 34th birthday in December. And it just everything feels a lot different for me. And I don't panic about timeline and I'm not panicking about this and that. And I'm not like, oh my gosh, like I need to move out and I used to feel these like panic. I used to feel this urgency all the time and I just feel so much more grounded. So I wanted to share it because it just seemed first of all, I mean it's for those that are going through it maybe or maybe have no idea if they went through it, like it's helpful on that plane. But I think on a more collective, deeper level as far as like Pluto and Aquarius now, we have these experiences as an individual to like help us in the collective because I'm a much better human being for like at work, at the grocery store, driving. Like I'm not like flicking people off. Like don't get me wrong, I have my moments, but I'm on average not like road raging it out and I'm, much more patient and I'm much more just like whoo woo saw. Like I can laugh off things that used to like really bother me before and the trajectory of my life. Like I know it's just going to be what's meant for me and like we co-create and I co-create in a very different way than what I used to. And my world looks a lot different than what it used to. So I hope, as always, that this episode was helpful. And I hope you enjoy the story time. That was a very long story, but it changed my life forever. Forever. There is no going back. And who knows if I might have another dark night of the soul? I don't know. And, like, at this point, I'm kind of like, "That would be cool." Like, I'm ready I'll go even deeper, bitch. You want me to go deeper? I'll go deeper. We could go there, you know what I mean? Because like, my life's 10 times better than what it was before, so, like, if you wanna up level me again, I'm here for it, universe, like, let's go, let's do it. You know what I mean? So, anyways, you guys, as always, I hope this was helpful, and, you guys can DM me, you can message me, share with me. I would love to hear if you guys had your own dark night of the soul. I would love to hear about it, because everyone is just so different, and the stories are just so cool and unique, and I love just, like, hearing about people's stories in that way. So, yeah, share with me. I'm always here, always, ready for the chit chats. So, as always, like, subscribe, do all the things. These videos will be their full video on YouTube. Podcast is available, Spotify, Apple. Um, yeah, that's all I got. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful week. Happy Thanksgiving because yeah, it'll be this week will be Thanksgiving that this is coming out. So I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving with their family and yeah, we'll chat soon. Bye guys.